fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Martian salutations, all you cognonauts out there, and welcome to Exofathom, the show that dares to explore the outside reaches of understanding. I am your host, Nick, and I am joined, as always, by my two lovely co-hosts, Ayla. How are you?
What up? I'm good. How are you?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we got Mike here. How's it going, man?
It's going. It's been a strange Friday.
Has it?
Yeah, there's like a dude playing guitar on the corner of like Sepulveda and Venice. Just like an acoustic guitar, just rocking out.
Nice. Maybe that's God.
Maybe
I think just, panhandling for some faith.
I did see the same bicyclist and the same car like blocks away from each other, like, in something that would just barely make sense as far as travel goes. So maybe there's a glitch in the Matrix.
Yes, perhaps there is. Well, thank you guys so much for listening in. We hope you're having a wonderful Friday evening. I know that we're itching to get the weekend started, and what better way than with your favorite crazy loopy podcast, Exofathom. So thank you so much, you guys. We very much appreciate it. This episode, I wanted to get into a little conversation about Mars. Just recently, we had the Perseverance rover touchdown on Mars. I believe that was February 18th.
Yeah. Woo! Mars!
Yeah. And so
I had to.
Yeah. And so I think I wanted to have a little conversation just about Mars, a couple other little things. The mission to populate Mars, some fun facts about the planet, a little bit of mythology for you guys, and then at the end we're going to do a little bit of conspiratorial speculation. So we hope that you guys come and join the journey with us and you enjoy. Before I get into the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, of the conversation, I have a question for you guys, and my question for you guys is, if you could fly to Mars tomorrow, would you go? Assuming that you could safely get there. Let's say
okay. Yeah. And assuming you come back, or it's like a one-way ticket.
Okay, yeah, but let's say you have to stay there for 6 months because they have 6 month cycles of when you can leave.
Okay. And have they terraformed yet?
No. It's as Mars as it is right now.
Oh, well, no. No. If it had more moons, maybe. But from right now, its night sky isn't anything to write home about. And if I want to go to a desert and eat MREs, I can do that in Arizona. Go to a military supply store.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you could just, go to Joshua Tree and take a lot of LSD, and you'd basically be the same spot. I'm kidding on the LSD. It's illegal, guys. You're not allowed to do that. I do not condone the use of illicit materials, so that was just a joke.
Yeah, especially considering, like, if anyone out there has nightmares, like, I already have a lot of nightmares. I would be terrified to give that a try.
The desert at night is already pretty scary, so yeah, you don't need to heighten that. That's for sure.
Wait. Can I bring illicit substances with me to Mars?
I mean, it's your trip, man. You can definitely go. You could definitely do that if you want. I'm sure there's no customs, so.
Yeah, what are the laws like on Mars as far as LSD goes? Do we know?
Well, I'm sure everything's legal. I don't think there are any laws. There are no laws yet, so it's the Wild West.
Sure, then why not?
Okay,
yeah.
Jeez.
Okay. Yeah, I can see where the appeal would be, and we'd be able to get away from all of the bureaucracy of Earth. That's for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, in all seriousness, I think it would be a good trip to go to, just to get away from humans, like just Dr. Manhattan it and just sit there for a good 6 months and meditate.
Right. Well, and I did say the 6 month window because I was listening to a podcast Elon Musk did a Joe Rogan just recently, and he was talking about how we have so much space, like not just the space debris, but the way Mars and Earth kind of operate around the sun. They have only a 6-month window in which you can go to Mars, which I thought was pretty interesting because if you have to time the trajectories of both the planets and where the planets are going to be, and if you miscalculate, you'll end up somewhere around Jupiter, and you definitely don't want that. So,
Oh man, that
could
still
you
sounds
imagine?
like fun though.
I mean, I guess, but what if could you imagine missing your stop and then you're just like, all right, guess we're going to Jupiter, gone forever.
No, you don't
That-
get to go. You just sit in like a shuttle for however many months, wait for things to get like an asteroid to hit your machine and then cannibalize each other, and you show back up at Earth two
No,
months
but
later, like, grizzled and
right, but I'm
strung
saying
out.
like no. What I was saying is that if the trajectories are off and the calculations are off, the ship could literally just fly out into Jupiter. So even if if you're in the window, if your calculations are off within the computer and all of that stuff, then you're going to end up outside outside of
Oh,
that window for sure.
I missed
So
that. Sorry.
It's sort of like just falling asleep on the bus and then waking up in the wrong side of town.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly. At
gosh,
the end
that's
of the line.
happened.
Oh,
And they're like, you gotta get out.
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, I'm
Well,
still
so-
okay with that. I mean, why
You're
not?
still okay. Then there, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? So you gotta go for the glory. But yeah, okay. I just I wanted to start off with that little question because I thought it would be interesting. I don't know if I would personally go right now. I don't know if I'll ever go, but it is something to think about because apparently we're not too far away from being able to make that decision. So perhaps in our lifetime we might be able to consider this seriously. But
Yeah,
before
I
we
guess
get
I'll
yes.
amend my response. If I'm like 80 years old and I don't really have much else to do, or I'm kind of like, yeah, let's mix it up a bit. Yeah, then I would go. I mean, there's conditions under which I would go. Preferably they would have terraforming, so like you can have like a nice restaurant on Mars and you can see the sky and like eat, and it's like a whole experience. But not much sooner than that, I don't think.
Yeah. Or they have like a Martian Nobu. Where it's
Yes.
like- all the celebrities go. Yeah.
How much money is it going to cost to go?
Honestly, that was one thing I was trying to figure out, but the commercial aspect of it is still hasn't really been worked out yet.
I'm sure by the time we can go, all your Dogecoin are going to be in full effect, and
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny if that was if that was the currency you had to use to go to Mars?
Mm-hmm. Just on Mars, you can only spend it there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could just always sneak on board, right?
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to be a stowaway at some point, I'm sure, hide in the what do they call that? The wheel well or whatever.
What do you think? Like Fifth Element?
Yeah, pretty much. But before we get into the population of Mars, which I do have as a segment, so we'll continue this just shortly, I wanted to give you guys some fun facts about Mars because, we want to be an informative podcast. I'd like to think that we are moderately informative, but most of the time uninformed. So to give you a little bit of information, Mars's mass is, and this is the mathematical jargon for it, it's a 6.39 times 10 to the 23rd kilograms, which is about an 11th or 0.11 the mass of Earth. So it's actually very small. I didn't know it was that small. But Mars does have moons, Ayla, but unfortunately Phobos and Deimos, which are the two moons, are actually technically Class C asteroids, which means that they're not big enough to ever create an atmosphere for themselves, and they're not really anything to write home about. If you looked at
talking about.
Yeah, if you looked at the comparison for Phobos and Deimos to our own moon, it's, I'd say, maybe 100th or 1,000th the size. So they're very small, very small.
And see, the thing is it's like, give it another decade, and pretty soon, like once we're there, it's going to be like Pluto, where they're like, it's not a planet. Then they're like, it is a planet. And then they're like, okay, it's like a subplanet. You know, like it creates. Yeah, I mean, kind of like what they're hinting at here, but no dice.
Yeah,
Well,
don't listen to those people. The
Don't
moon's the
listen to
moon.
The
Unless
moon
it's
to the moon.
unless
Are we
it's a
talking
Death
to
Star.
Phobos and Deimos?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
listen to them. You're still a moon.
They're still important. Only because I take the whole Pluto thing really personally. Being from Pluto, it hurts that
Yeah.
my home planet's classified as a subplanet.
It's an exoplanet now.
Is that
So,
what they're calling it?
Yeah, it's an outside planet. But yeah,
oh my god,
Phobos,
I just got a picture of Pluto as like a rebel, like the outsider planet, and it's got like a little jean jacket and it's popped collar, like. That's my last interruption, Nick.
Oh, that's okay. Phobos and Deimos, so those are the two asteroid sort of moons. But what's interesting about that is that some scientists actually think that this is a precursor to Mars getting a ring. They believe in the next 1,000,000 years or so, Mars will have a ring like Saturn does, because it's slowly collecting particulate and smaller asteroids. And so they speculate that eventually Mars will have its own ring. So, in the future, it might be a very beautiful planet to look at, or at least, to sip a mimosa while looking out on the rings. Mars's orbital year is 687 days, so it's almost twice the number of days compared to the Earth. And the temperature of the surface, this one I thought was really crazy, because I'm like, I don't know how we're going to get around this, but the temperature of the surface varies between -87 and -5 degrees Celsius, which converts to, because we are not metric system people here. This is America, and we use Fahrenheit and feet and stuff.
Those are weirdos. Feet.
No, it's the right way to go. I was just thinking that we need to pull out of the UN if they don't convert to our system.
Oh my goodness! I like the sound of Celsius. It sounds so much more like
it sounds smarter. Yeah,
it does.
It sounds smarter.
They need
Fahrenheit.
We could keep our system. Then our military things can't be used in their military.
Yeah, it'll just make them confused. That's true. That's true. They don't know feet or Fahrenheit. So, but the surface of Mars actually gets to -124 degrees Fahrenheit. And then its warmest is 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's actually a really big jump. So it's a jump of 140 degrees.
Yeah, that's cold. Really...
Wear a lot of clothes, you'll be fine.
Yeah, just wear a lot of clothes. But even at its warmest, it's like a winter in Northern California. So it's not going to be the most warm.
Well, it's just funny because everyone's like, global warming. Let's just go to Mars. Like, well,
yeah.
If we, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, we're going to get into that too, because I have some questions for you guys about the ethics of planetary, dispersal. But a couple more fun facts for you guys. The first ever record of Mars actually comes from Egyptian astronomers in 2000 BCE. So roughly 4,000 years ago is when we first have documentation of Mars, which I thought was crazy, but makes sense because it is a red star in our sky, and I'm sure that people would have been paying very close attention to that red star.
Probably looked more red too, with no electricity and
no light pollution. Yeah. Definitely. And then the gravity on Mars is only actually 0.375 of what Earth's is. So roughly a third. So if you ever want to lose weight, just go to Mars and you'll weigh exactly a third of what you weigh now.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the new Atkins diet. Hey, it would actually work. I mean,
that should be like if I ever go on Tinder and there's I don't know, does it have a weight? Anyway, I would just put on Mars I would be.
yeah.
I only tell my weight in Mars.
Yeah, low grav diet instead of a low carb diet. And Mars is home to the tallest mountain in our solar system, at least of what we know right now. But it's a volcano called Olympus Mons, and it's 16 miles high. 16 miles high. And for reference, I believe that Everest is something like 5 or 7 miles high. So
Dude.
it's very, very large.
Dude.
And what strikes me too is that it's like the planet of Mars is not even the same, like nowhere near the same size. It's about a tenth of the size of Earth. So to have such a big volcano on it, like that's crazy. Mars also is home to the largest dust storms in the solar system that can cover the entire planet for months at a time.
How fun.
So yeah,
Go.
so you definitely got to be like, okay, well, if I'm going to be one of these people on Mars, you're going to be experiencing 3-month-long dust storms where you have to stay in like one of your little NASA tents, and oh my gosh, just sounds like hell.
Did you ever watch Total Recall? Either of you?
Yeah, I think we watched it not too long ago.
Well, which one?
I think
Schwarzenegger.
So
that's the only one.
the only
It
one.
is.
But yeah, no, but they have like scenes about the exterior of Mars, and very windy, very dusty, very hot, which is weird because it's not hot. Wait, right? Because it's cold most of the time. It's weird.
Oh yeah, no, it's
just
not
red,
hot at
so
all.
We think it's
Yeah.
hot. That's weird.
It's very cold.
That's like when I'm playing that Beat Saber game, and all of a sudden your red saber's now like green, and your right saber's pink, and you're like, wait, and you gotta like switch it up.
Yeah, just like Beat Saber. And my last little fun fact for you guys is that Mars has a canyon system at its equator that is larger than North America. So you got to think about, again, a tiny planet that's about the 10th of the size of the Earth having a canyon system that's larger than North America, and then a volcano that's 16 miles high.
Do we have pictures of those? Like, where are we landing a rover, and why aren't we landing it closer to these epic features?
So I mean, we can get into the rovers and stuff soon, but if you see in this picture on our screen here, if you see that black ring towards the bottom of Mars, that the black outcropping there, that would be considered, I believe, the trench that we're talking about this here.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's the end of my fun facts about Mars. But since Ayla mentioned the rovers, I think that's where we'll go next. And that's to say that Mars is populated only by robots, you guys. It's the population is just a bunch of robots that are sitting around and collecting rocks.
It's like WALL-E then.
It is. It's like the reverse WALL-E. They're just waiting for us to trash it so that they can clean it up.
Right? Or like maybe the first robot has now gained consciousness, and now this new robot came to town, and it's like the Eevee, and like the two robots just fall in love.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are 6. So there were 6 robots, rovers that have been sent to Mars successfully. 5 from America and 1 from China. But unfortunately, 4 of the robots have signed out for eternity. So there are 4 dead robots on Mars.
When you say signed
and 2
out,
alive.
Do we know what happened to them? Like, did they just like die? Or
Yeah,
get stuck?
yeah, we do. And my literal next sentence was going to tell you what happened to one of them. So the Opportunity was one of the rovers, and its last message to home was a report about its battery running low and that a storm was approaching. And that was the last that Houston ever heard from Opportunity. Which
sounds like something you'd say if you gained consciousness, like, "Oh, a storm's coming," and then duck out.
Or it's the last report from a robot that's about to meet its demise, which is pretty depressing.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Good night, my sweet prince, I think is the line.
Oh right. Yeah, because it became kind of a meme when when Opportunity sent the message, and a lot of people extrapolated the sort of more they extrapolated a sort of more poetic interpretation of that, which was my battery is running low and it's getting dark. But the literal information that they got from the Opportunity rover was the battery percentage, which was dangerously low, and the meteoromic information that there was a dust storm approaching. So the nerds on the internet wanted to give it a good send off, and so it got a little bit more of a poetic goodbye, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, you can't just be like, there's dust covering these, because I'm sure it's using solar panels to charge something, right?
Right.
And dust covers all the panels, and then it just can't charge itself. So yeah, the poetic send off is much better than I got dust on my panels or something.
And I'm running 1% battery.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's totally is. I mean, and if we've populated Mars with just robots, then it should stand to reason that we should respect these little guys a little bit more if we're ever to join them up there. I would hope that there's a large statue built of like the first rover at least on Mars. Yeah. You gotta give credit where credit's due, I would say. But the newest rover to touch down on Mars is the Perseverance, which actually launched in July 30th of 2020 and just touched down February 18th. So roughly about 6 months. And its main objective, which I thought was interesting, not only just to collect sediment samples and rocks and stuff, but and it's written into the NASA website. One of the main objectives is the search for signs of ancient life, whether it's within fossil samples or perhaps bacterial samples, things like that. So I thought it was kind of cool that, like the narrative went from, because I remember when, speculation about life on Mars was still such an out there idea that nobody really wanted to entertain it. Now we're seeing, NASA actually saying, hey, I'm sure we're going to find something, whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a fossil, we're going to find something there. And so let's make sure that we have our rovers looking for that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's cool. But I'm pretty sure this leads to Doom, because Doom is all about hell being in Mars. There's also Ghost of Mars, I think. I forgot what movie, that Ice Cube movie. Where
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, they end up finding out there's ancient evil life living inside of Mars. That'd be
pretty crazy.
They take the rovers and repurpose them, send them back.
Oh my god, make them killing machines.
Yes. There was so I've been watching a lot of Star Trek lately, Next Generation, and they had a whole episode recently about some scientists that went to a planet. They were, trying to populate it and get it going as a little colony for humans. And they were drilling into the ground and doing all kinds of stuff. And there were mysterious deaths or something like that. And then so Picard's team, they get there and they're doing some more research, and they find out that there's a consciousness on the planet. And they can only communicate because of, I think, one of the, I don't know if it's the character Deanna Troi who can read minds kind of, or is highly intuitive, or if it was because Data has a similar way to receive. I don't know what the whole story was. It's been a minute, but it was just cool because it was this entity that was on the planet and populated very well, but it couldn't signal to the humans that were there. And so then when it was talking to the new humans, it was I tried to warn them. It just was really interesting.
Can you imagine if our rovers ran into them? Hopefully, the rovers can communicate with those life forms and then warn the rovers to warn us.
Well, I mean, luckily there's, the rovers don't have machine guns on them yet. So hopefully any entity that runs into it won't perceive it as a threat. And then maybe we can snap a picture of it. That would be pretty cool. What if you just see some weird entity taking a selfie with the Perseverance rover?
But it's going to be more like nature photographers, where they're trying to take a picture of a fox, and then the fox is just sitting behind it. What are we looking at?
Mm-hmm. Well, and kind of cool to add to that sort of ability to document Mars a little bit more extensively. The Perseverance had a hitchhiker with it. And this is actually something I didn't even know about. I thought it was really cool, is that the Mars helicopter has landed with the Perseverance. And it's a little drone helicopter that will be the first powered flight on Mars. And
Dude.
they want to be able to do it at least once, fly it at least once every 30 days or so. So they're hoping to have a handful of missions in this 2-year long mission that the Perseverance is going to be on. They hope to have a handful of drone flights that they can, bring back and analyze. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like, imagine what the drone footage of Mars is going to be like.
Well, and I love that you talk about it being a 2 Earth year long mission. I mean, right? Like if we start to populate other planets, we're going to have to start being specific about the time durations we're referencing.
Yeah. And I think we'll probably in the future have to use Earth years as the common sort of measurement for time, at least until we more establish ourselves on a more permanent planet. Or perhaps have a federation on some planet or something.
How Earth-centric of you.
I know. Well, it is extremely Earth-centric. How dare I, as an Earthling?
So I count my years in Pluto years, all right?
Oh, okay. All right. So you're not even 1 year old yet.
Not yet. I'll get there. Don't worry.
Yeah. I don't even know if you will get there in your lifetime. But yeah, so I mean, obviously, the end goal for all of this is the population of Mars, or bringing humans to Mars. That is really where the rubber meets the road, and that's kind of where everybody wants to get to, whether it's the Mars One program, or it's NASA, or it's Elon Musk. Mars seems to be the definitive place that we are going next, and so. These 3 main endeavors I will go into. The first one was the Mars One project, and I think you guys remember this because it was claiming to be the project that was going to put 100 people on Mars, right? 100 astronauts that would go and live on Mars until the end of their days and basically set up this first colony on Mars. And it was created by a Dutch company, and it was supposed to be an international endeavor in order to find the top 100 people to go out and become the new Martians. Unfortunately, what seems to be is that Mars One was a funding pit, and none of the funding went through for this project, and they unfortunately went bankrupt in 2019. As I read their website, it seems like they're still taking funding, or they're still looking for funding for this project. But as of now, the 100-person mission to Mars seems to be shuttered, which I kind of am disappointed with, because I remember when that news came out and I was pretty excited to hear that. But I mean, like, I guess it's better, and I'll get your guys' input, but I guess it's better that they went bankrupt before they put people on Mars. I mean, like, could you, like, that'd be awful, right? Like the governing body that was meant to help sustain you on Mars goes bankrupt. Like,
wouldn't
who steps
it be good?
Just slightly awkward.
Yeah. Just get the voicemail every time you try to call, and it's like, all right, we guess we're on our own until Elon Musk comes and saves us.
Or JPL.
JPL, who knows? There's a lot of people going for it. There's a lot. NASA has a little bit more of a methodic approach, a little bit more, I would say, tempered. Their projection is to try to have human on Mars by 2030, which seems still a little bit ambitious to me, but I guess the way things are going right now, it's probably about accurate. And they have a 3-phase approach to getting there in their system. So phase 1 is going to involve more research at the International Space Station, specifically to study how long-term inhabitants in space affects the human body. Because one of the biggest hurdles that we face right now, especially in space, not just space, and then obviously being on a planet with much less gravity, is that you lose bone. You lose bone and muscle. They go very fast in space, apparently, and you can lose up to like 10% of your bone and muscle, or 20% in 100 days of space time. So that's why astronauts at the International Space Station, they have to do special exercises on these weight machines every day in order to keep their bone density and their muscle mass. Otherwise, they can turn into the people in Wall-E, right? The ones on their little maglev chairs that don't have any more bones anymore because they've been sitting in 0Gs for so long.
Freaky.
Yeah, so that's going to be a really big issue for us if we want to traverse the stars in the solar system, is what to do about that main hurdle of just prolonged exposure to space.
You know what's weird is like, when they talk about cabin pressure when you're in like a commercial airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I always thought that cabin pressure had to deal with like, I mean, like I thought it just would apply if you were on a shuttle. You know what I mean? Like I thought for some reason if you were in a shuttle, you were somehow insulated from those effects. But it
Right.
seems like we haven't figured out how to isolate and create our own gravitational forces, haven't we? That's
Yeah.
kind of a hard thing.
Yeah, at least in some sort of meaningful way that wouldn't harm our body. Yeah, so because even in the space station, when they're floating around, it's affecting their bodies dramatically. So we definitely were going to have to figure out ways to offset that if we expect to live on another planet.
Yeah, I wonder, couldn't we just have like a ship that was like a big circle that like did a lot of spinning so that like
a flying saucer?
No, actually there was I think the movie Contact has a ship like what I'm thinking about. So it has like it's just always spinning, but you would have like a pod, so you're getting that like G-force maybe.
Yeah, and they have that in like 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? A lot of space movies usually have that like that wheel that moves, that provides like a certain level of gravity for the astronauts.
Yeah, just put a wheel on it.
Just put a wheel on it. Put a hamster wheel on it.
I'm thinking of Tremors when he's like, "Why don't you put that thing? Let it go. Let them play with that thing." Sorry, ideas.
It's good. Yeah, we may have to like find some resources and like set up some like space construction yard to build something that's big enough that can, when it spins, it gives you that gravitational pull that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or either that or have space CrossFit. I mean, we could do that too. Yeah. Space imagine like cycle? Lifting 20 tons in space. Getting your reps in.
And coaches are suddenly essential. They're boarding on like essential.
Your 0G squats. Yeah. But okay, so phase 2 is going to involve lunar exploration. So NASA wants to put another human on the moon by 2025, which I think is pretty cool. I would like to see another human on the moon. We haven't done that in quite a long time. So that will also give our astronauts and NASA a little bit more feedback about what it might be like logistically to move around on something similar to the moon, like Mars. Perhaps they can send up, equipment up to the moon and set up like a base there in order to simulate what it might be like on Mars.
I would totally go to a moon or
the moon base.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure we're gonna have a moon base by 2025. So
we better.
Isn't there some like real secret dark side of the moon base already?
Oh well, yes. That's not owned by
the moon, didn't they?
They did, but we only saw like one picture, and that was it. So, but yeah, the dark side of the moon's not owned by us. We'll have to be by the Sea of Tranquility. That is where the aliens allow us to be on the moon.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So we'll have to have some peace treaties, I'm sure, because territory is going to get real weird once we leave this Earth.
Because we're just gonna take it all over. You know how humans be.
Oh yeah, I know. And their third phase for NASA is going to involve bringing humans to Martian orbit. So I don't know if they're planning on having like maybe a long-term orbiter around Mars, in the efforts to sort of get humans to eventually land on the surface with enough equipment to return to Earth. So NASA's plan is to bring people back, which I think is a little bit more hopeful than the Mars One mission. I mean, like, I if I was signing up, I would choose the NASA plan because, you know, at least they're going to try to get me back. Even if it fails, I can be like, hey, they did their best. You know, the Mars One plan was like, hey, we're just going to leave you there and see what you get up to.
It's like a reality show, like the ultimate reality show.
It really is. It's the real world, the new real world.
Like, what is it, that Jonestown cult?
Oh yeah, it would get weird very fast.
Right? I mean, I feel like my mind just always goes to like, oh, it's going to be a cult setting. But I mean, come on now. The resources get minimal. I saw Matt Damon's The Martian. Wasn't he on Mars? And he was like trying to subsist. I mean, it just seems so difficult and complicated. It would be tough.
Yeah, it would be very tough. And you'd have to have a very good knowledge of biology, botany, horticulture, permaculture, engineering, you know, like
or just
definitely need no Celsius.
Or a bunch of books, or a bunch of books. I mean, like
books and super smart people back home. You need open communication, though. I think that would be important. But I would assume it's always a one-way trip. Like you can tell me you're gonna try to pluck me off the planet and bring me back to Earth, but I don't think that's like what you should go in hoping for.
I mean, the first mission for sure. I mean,
well, yeah, but I think that I think the only reason Mars makes sense for humans at all is because they want to be able to go back and forth, and you know, so yeah, the first mission, those people are very brave, and I certainly salute them. But yes, you're right. Expecting to return probably is going to be a little bit optimistic. You know.
You know what I wondered too? Okay, so maybe I'm totally wrong, and I'm sorry if you get into this later, but I wonder if part of the appeal of Mars is that, wait a minute, maybe not. Well, I'm just thinking, okay, so Earth has so much gravitational forces on it, and yet we have rockets that boost stuff and throw it into the, space, and it goes to a planet. If you do that on a planet with lower gravitational force, can you get more speed?
Yeah,
to another planet? Like, is that part of the allure too? The fact that like it could be a base of something.
Yeah, and it would take significantly less energy to get out of Mars's atmosphere than it would Earth. So yeah, I mean, it would make more sense for us to have bases or jumping off points on Mars instead of Earth, because eventually over time it'll be a lot less energy heavy on us. Mm-hmm. That is to say, I mean, where are we going after Mars? I think, and we can get into, trust me, my philosophy section is literally just questions like this. So we'll be talking about that. But I wanted to touch on Elon Musk's plan, because his plan varies a little bit from NASA's, even though he is working with NASA through SpaceX and all that stuff. But Elon Musk wants to have 1 million people on Mars by 2060.
Okay.
And there's a National Geographic article about it. You guys can look it up. He is very sound on that timeline. He says that if the numbers add up, and that realistically he could say that by 2060 you would at least have thousands of people going back and forth to Mars. And then he said realistically, once that happens, once you have a reliable mode of transporting back and forth from Mars, within 40 years of that point, you're going to have a civilization on Mars that has 1 million people on it. And that's what he wants to do. And his other plan for helping terraform Mars is to nuke it. And apparently that would help boost the production of an atmosphere for the planet. Now, I don't necessarily know. I mean, obviously, these people who are scientists know better than I do. We would have to create some sort of greenhouse effect, right? Because the only benefit to having an atmosphere on Mars is if we can warm it up a bit, right? I mean, aside from being able to possibly breathe, but if you still have dust storms and all that crazy stuff, you're not going outside anyways.
I think it it's just a little arrogant to say what you can do when you haven't even been there. Like, what if you get there and you discover stuff that was unobservable by our tech from way over here, right? Like,
Yeah, of course.
there's so many different things, but then again, arrogance does lead to really big leaps. So, I'm for it. I'll watch.
My only question is if he's gonna nuke it from orbit. That's all.
Yeah.
Like you need an atmosphere. You need to grow stuff, right? Because you have to start to create the little bits of life. Unless we're just gonna like bring all of the Earth soil with us. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I mean, like, yeah, this seems like some cool beings. Just do it. Go do it.
Yeah,
Go
go
do
send
it.
some nukes to Mars.
It seems like a good way to get rid of all of Earth's nukes is just to nuke a neighboring
my gosh.
planet.
Just nuke it. Yeah, send them all to Mars and see if it'll bring about dinosaurs.
Now, what would be terrifying though is like if we nuked it and then we accidentally messed up our own orbit.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
we found out that like our orbit was relying on like the neighboring planets, and they're
Right.
Which it totally is. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you have like the Midnight Sun episode of Twilight Zone, where we're slowly heading towards the sun. So that's like maybe one downside, but I'm sure there's some math nerds that could figure out how many nukes we can. What's the optimal amount of nukes we can send to Mars, and what's the probability that those nukes will create an atmosphere that can sustain human life by 2060?
I mean, like, I don't even know if that'll be the case. Like, if you decide to nuke, if you're going to class Mars, then you probably have to add 100 years to that
the radiation.
Yeah, like you're going to irradiate an entire planet. You don't want to go there right away.
What's Bill Gates doing with all that, shooting all this stuff in the sky? Can he do that at Mars?
Right.
Can they work together?
Can we just send him to Mars now? Can he just go? Can he be the first person we send?
Yeah.
The scout. He could be our scout.
Totally. We'll build a statue for him here, and then
you say that now, and then he's gonna have like this boss place on Mars, and it's all decked
that's fine.
out.
He can stay on Mars for the rest of eternity. I'm okay with that. I'll stay here on Earth.
What is it? In dodgeball, it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it works out.
Yeah. Well, since we're already kind of touching on some of this, in this sort of vein of philosophy and ethics, I wanted to ask you guys, because I'm actually kind of struggling with this question myself, and part of me understands, like I'm kind of split in the middle, but it definitely brought upon the question in my head: do we have any right to thrust humanity into the universe? And I will say that my pretense for asking this question is because it seems to me that Mars is this sort of like savior and answer to all of our questions. Like, we had mentioned climate change earlier, but the issues that Earth is dealing with. Well, now that we have Mars, it's like, oh, okay, well, we can jump to another planet and at least part of humanity will be saved. And I don't know if I like that paradigm where it's like Earth is effed, let's just accept it and not do any work to try to make it better, but let's just start looking at Mars as the next place that we can drain of all of its resources and make $1 million Mars dollars.
I mean, I could see it that way, but then I think about like what percentage of our resources are going to Mars exploration? Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's still not like the majority of our, like focus and things like that. But I feel like it's kind of people who just want to have a plan B, like it's always a good time to start on a plan B. It's like people who start saving their 401ks in their early 20s. Like those people, like, you're just planning ahead, and it's smart to plan ahead.
Yeah, I suppose. But then it's like
like
you have these people that are like, oh, the Earth is global warming is terrible. So let's burn all of this jet fuel to thrust people into the atmosphere in the hopes that we can repopulate another planet so that way we don't have to die of global warming. Like,
well, I think, but also too, it's like humans like to, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could probably slice it, but my understanding is like, eventually we're just going to drift into the sun. And I think like one of the coolest quotes I heard was that like the future of humanity rests upon our ability to explore our universe. Otherwise, our fate's tied to this one planet. And
would it
having,
not be?
well, they've identified other planets, not just Mars, but like other planets that are Goldilocks planets. And so I think the idea is that, like, if we can get to that planet one day, we could have a second Earth, which would be pretty dope. And
So we
like,
can be a blight on that too.
yeah, well, hopefully by that point we, come to appreciate what we had or
But
what we
you
lost.
see, you see the kind of the point I'm making. I'm not
Oh, yeah.
necessarily arguing with you. I understand myself. Part of me understands, like, I know the concept of reaching for the stars is important. And so I'm not necessarily criticizing that. But I do think that there is a little bit of humor in this concept that we're going to jump to another planet in an effort to escape the mistakes that we made on this planet. And
Yeah.
unfortunately for me, what leaves a bad taste in my mouth is that the people that will jump to the next planet will be the ones that extracted all of the resources from this one. And I don't see that chain ever stops. It doesn't seem to me that we just jump to Mars and then all of a sudden we're enlightened beings that know not to mess with planets anymore.
Well, if your theory holds, then current Earth will become like a Zion and we'll just party into the sun.
Yeah.
I feel like the oceans will get clean again.
I'm kind of down for it, to be honest. Like, there's something, I don't know what it is, but in my mind, there's something romantic about going down with the ship. And, like, if we're spending billions upon billions of dollars, Lord knows how much money has gone into this, space exploration thing, which I think is fine. But let's not feign ignorance about the fact that all of that money could have gone to help alleviate all of the problems that are happening here from the companies that are actually doing this stuff. Like, it's.
Every planet's gonna have its own problems, no matter where we go. And the whole universe in itself is going to have its own problem because it's headed towards the black hole, right? So this whole thing's we're just trying to make sure that our species doesn't die off on, like you said, one planet. But we also don't know how to terraform. Right. So maybe creating this problem with holes in the ozone layer might be good. It might give us impetus to create the technology needed to create an atmosphere. Because, not terraforming also too, you want to change the land and all that crap. But it might be the impetus to start to learn how to create atmospheres, through the various projects that I'm sure exist on, like black books and all that stuff. But then we can extrapolate that to other planets and, like any problem that we create, we can't solve. And the whole like curse of being a human is that we always create our own problems. So like you're not going to be able to run away from your problems just by hopping over to another planet. But we like to explore, we like to expand. So I mean,
I definitely recognize the inevitability of it for sure.
Yeah, I see nothing wrong with it. I don't see it as like such a dramatic thing where it's like we have to get off this planet right now, otherwise we're screwed. Because even if we have like a global, another great flood or whatever, there will still be humans around to start the whole process over again. And the Earth will heal, and then if it's not humans, it's going to be some other I don't know, reptiles or insects, like whatever animals end up surviving, usually the real small ones, right?
Yeah.
So like the whole process is going to repeat itself over and over until there's some species that can jump off of this planet and reliably start colonies on other planets, but then those planets will have those problems and ad infinitum.
Yeah. No, I definitely see, like, and I kind of like, there is a little bit of poetry to that as well, I would say. But it's funny because, you know, like I did hear that talking point about like the Earth being swallowed by the sun, but that's like, according to most estimations, that's happening in like 90 million years to like a billion years. So, I mean, like, do we think humans will even be around in a billion years for it
Well,
to
there's
matter?
other like
One
theories
would
too.
hope.
It could be asteroids, you know, that hit the planet, or
Oh,
there could be
certainly.
issues with our core. There could be issues with our
Well,
tilt. There could be
there's
all kinds
issues
of
all around, but I mean,
yeah.
you know, that's not going to change by us leaving, you know, going to another planet. I think all I mean to say is that I get the inevitability for man to go out into space, but I think what we are doing is giving the haves an exit strategy when they are the ones that are putting us in the position to have to leave Earth in the first place. And I don't necessarily appreciate that, because if they would just play by the rules, then we may not have to leave Earth at all. I mean, we could do it just for sort of exploratory purposes, like Mike said, but we wouldn't have to do it for existential purposes.
Well, I mean, it's existential to the haves, right? Like they have so much stuff they feel like they need to hold on to it, so they're the ones that are feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
Um, as a have not, I suppose it's just sort of cool to kick back and like see them try this sort of stuff because it's important to try.
Mm.
They're important to do. There is no try. Um, but yeah, I mean, the unintended consequences of building industry will always be there, right? It's you have to take either, if you're ethical about it, it's a calculated risk. It's some hard numbers, and you try to keep humanity involved. You know, like creating automation that loses people's jobs or switching from dirty energy to clean energy. Ideally, you'd be able to have jobs for these people that are you're automating or tech shifting away in the
Yeah.
ideal case. But I don't. I would hope that the people that did it, the quote unquote haves, um, didn't do it greedily, like out of malice, but sort of like got in a little bit, got kind of got out of their depth and had to adapt on the fly.
Mm.
Renowers just trying to do the best that they can. But I think that's because I hold an optimistic nature of humanity. They could have just been wanting to make millions and millions of Mars bars, which is what we should call Mars money. Mars
Definitely.
bars.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think that's kind of just like, you know, my trepidation about it, because there is a looming hysteria about the fate of Earth, and the fate of Earth within the next 30 years even. And to me, it doesn't bring me any solace or comfort to know that a select group of a few humans might be able to go out and populate another planet. That doesn't do anything for me. It does nothing for me in my situation, because I'm going to be stuck here while everything burns and they go off and get to have a nice time in space. You know, like I don't think that that's cool, man. I don't jive with that. That's not my dig. I don't,
On the bright side, though, you'll have your bone density, you'll have your
That's
muscle
true.
mass, your
That's true.
spine
Bone
won't
density.
shrink,
If they ever come back to Earth, I'm whooping their asses.
and I think the best part is going to be wherever they get to where they're going, they might be given a problem set that they don't have the resources to solve.
Well,
So
yeah.
then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they will then find themselves in that same position that we are, but at least we'll be here with some sort of resources while the whole ship goes down. We got a
Yeah.
big part, right?
There you go. I can take some comfort in the fact that they might get swallowed by a black hole in in a millennium or whatever. But,
Well, I mean, imagine they get to Mars and there's just something that they didn't plan for. I don't
Yeah.
think they, in that like really unforgiving situation, right? You're not going to go back to your mom's house if you realized you forgot to carry the one and figuring out how much oxygen you should bring or something like that. There's no turning back for them. So they're going to find themselves stuck in a position that they've never been in before.
Yeah, that is very true. And part of me wonders too, it's like, okay, so when say we've gotten to Mars. Say there's a Elontopia, where it's the first city of Mars, and like people are living their normal lives. Okay, cool. So is Mars just a backup planet for if something happens to Earth, something happens to Mars, then that's the backup planet for Earth, so backup planet for Mars? Like, we're not getting past our solar system. I still just can't believe that we will ever make it out of our solar system. At least with what we know about space travel in its sort of iteration right now. I know that we've talked about generational ships before, and that's all well and good, but you have no destination. There's nowhere to go. And the closest places outside of our solar system are still dozens of light years away. And I don't know. I mean, like, to me it just seems like, what are we doing? We're looking out so far away with just kind of ignoring what's going on in front of us right now. And like, I see the merit in looking towards the future and sort of planning for bigger things. I get that. But I also think that it's kind of an excuse to ignore what's going on Earth.
Maybe. Or maybe the stuff that's happening on Earth is far more difficult to solve, and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah,
So
maybe
like,
hey, let's just start a new one.
Yeah, it's like the virtue signaling thing, right? Coming around to say that you need dirty energy to create clean energy right now is not very fashionable.
Right.
Like, to say that we'll have a clean, utopian place on some other planet sounds really freaking cool.
Yes.
So
yes,
you put all your energy and attention into that, and just stay away from it's the magician's trick, the illusionist trick. But I would think that Martian culture and Martian, give it a few generations, they would really hate the idea of being a backup planet, just like any Earthling would hate the idea of being a backup planet.
I agree.
Right? You would have those cultures evolve in their own independent ways based off
and
their
then they
own
go to war with each other.
Yes. Star Wars. Let's see it.
Could you imagine if it's just like, the Empire basically sets up on Mars, and then it's all the rest of us ragtag folk on Earth, and we have to build like junker spaceships to go fight the Empire.
As long as we have some explosions in space somehow, I'll be happy.
Yeah, that would be great.
Exploding space.
I know. But Ayla, what do you got to say about all this? I mean, like, I understand your point of view about sort of like wanting to make sure that we're looking out into the future and sort of securing the existence of, the inevitability that Earth will eventually be gone. But do you have anything else you want to add?
I mean, I've just been watching a lot of Star Trek. And so, I mean, I want to have faith in humanity that, maybe launching us to a new planet will inspire us to be better people. And we'll see some really cool shifts towards, respecting our home base better. I feel like, we get to Mars and it's like shitty because it's freezing and there's wind everywhere and it's dusty and it's a lot of work. And yeah, you got to do even more CrossFit because of your bones. We'll probably appreciate this planet a little bit more. And I think that it would be really cool if we could get other countries to join in on this effort so that we can have the Star Trek Federation and like have an awesome code of ethics and go into the universe and meet other alien races if they are out there. I think they have to be. How could they not be out there? We're not at the center of the universe. We're like on some tangential plane. There could totally be other Earths just like us, and there could be other life forms. So like, I guess I just see it from a being curious, optimistic standpoint. Plus too, I mean, like the universe, there's so much we don't know. So the closer we get to uncovering those mysteries, we can start to look back at some of the unanswerable questions that we've just been pondering for forever and maybe get some kind of insight there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think that there will be insights that we gain from space exploration for sure, especially about maybe the nature of reality and stuff like that. But I think it was something that you mentioned that I have trepidation with. And it follows along this sort of narrative that, like humans are conquerors. And, what I mean by do we have any right to thrust ourselves into the universe is really, do we have any right to colonize the universe?
Well, see,
Because that's what we're going to do.
well, that's what Star Trek has such a great forward thinking sort of ethos behind it because they have protocols for that kind of stuff. Like if you come into contact with a planet and they're of a certain level, you don't interfere. And then if there is a planet with, aliens on it or whatever, you are diplomatic and you it's just a really cool show.
Yeah,
So I'm just
I
thinking
don't
about
think.
Captain Picard.
Yeah, it's a cool show, but the logistics of a galactic authority and governing body will probably be a nightmare.
Oh,
And
don't be such
I
a Debbie
definitely.
Downer. It could be great,
Well,
just
look,
as much as it
I'm
could be
trying to be
bad.
realistic about it. You're referencing a fictional story, and my question is, do we have do we have an ethical dilemma on our hands? So should we create this federation before we even set foot on another planet? Is maybe a better question. Do we create this code of morals before we even decide to venture out? Because at some point, somebody's going to be a jerk and try to land on a planet to extract its resources or kill the native, whatever is on there.
I mean, in the beginning, humans are. I mean, just in American history, we have the whole manifest destiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you just extrapolate that further, we will be barbaric, especially in tough places like Mars. If there was already a group of natives there, right? And we didn't have the technology to build comforts that our civilization that we have now due to our civilizations. We would definitely be barbaric and want to take that by force. Whether or not that's right or wrong, I think comes down to a planet by planet thing. Like remember in Star Trek, it's not like the beginnings of space exploration. They already have a galactic federation set up. And to set up morals without personal experience can be damaging to the overall mission of setting up of colonization. I think it's going to be you're going to have to do what you're going to have to do in order to make sure the human race continues. And then that gets really ugly. You might have to compromise yourself a bit, but no matter what, as long as that mission is fulfilled, you're dealing with does the ends justify the means. But I don't think initially it'll be pretty. Maybe somewhere further down the line, once we can reflect and we have stable bases and be like, oh wow, we really should not have nuked Mars. We should have gone with this course of action now with this technology. But if we never nuke Mars, we may never know.
Ayla, I heard you. Did you want to say?
No, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. Everything sucks. Don't do it.
No, okay, come on.
No, I didn't say don't do it.
Like,
I understand the value.
And at what point will humans deserve to expand into the universe? Because
That's
in
a
the
good
Star
question.
Trek model, right? Like on Earth, they figured out how to comfortably feed everybody, how to comfortably house and clothe everybody, how to have medicine because they were able to cure things like with a pen. You know what I mean? So I think like those are questions that we're going to need to keep answering and exploring, and there is trial and error. But I think that in trial and error, there is such a thing as failing forward. So you're always making some sort of progress one way or another.
Yeah.
They call it effing up for a reason.
Yeah. No, I definitely see the merit in like this earnesty and sort of optimism, and I want to be optimistic about it too. Trust me, and I think that Mike made a good point. If there was some sort of federation that already existed that we were inducted into, I think I'd be a lot more optimistic about that, because that would mean the system has already been in place. All we have to do is follow that system. I just have issues with, and maybe Mike, you're right. It's going to take that, and Ayla, you said this too. It's going to take that trial and error in order for us to realize what the right thing to do is. And I just hope that, we hopefully don't make the exact same decisions that we made on Earth.
One would hope. But yeah, we have a lot of problems, obviously, on Earth. But being in conflict, being this dual type nature is such a core component of humanity. If we created a utopia here, I could venture to say that we're no longer human. We've become something else.
Right.
So we can comfortably clothe people. We can comfortably feed people. I think we have enough resources to do it. It's just the way that we've set things up doesn't always work. Somebody gets greedy, no matter what. That's where communism fails. That's where, in my opinion, this notion of a globalization, like a one world government type thing, where all the nations shake hands and we're no longer a nation, we're Earth. I think that's where that will fail too, because humans get greedy. We have way too long in our evolution where our environment was really efficient at killing us for us not to be greedy.
That's
and
true.
It's going to take millions of years to unwork that from our DNA. So
well, and that goes to Ayla's point kind of about, the way Star Trek treated their society of being able to have sustainable energy and, creating a world in which people actually just, did things for leisure instead of having to work. And perhaps that set their society up for the Galactic Federation in a way where it's you've basically socially trained the necessity for greed out of a society by offering them everything and giving them everything they need. But even at that sort of clip, it might be a hard thing to do. But there's a little bit of weird synchronicity with all of this as well. And I wanted to, this will kind of touch on the mythology section of the conversation, because I really I want to say how ironic and sort of weirdly synchronistic that the first jump for humanity to reach into the cosmos is going to be on a planet named after a god of war and plague. And so that doesn't bode well for the first step into the solar system. And that gets into the mythology section of my talk. And I wasn't really going to get too deep into Mars or Ares because we can have a whole conversation separately about the gods. But what I did want to bring up is that there are many iterations to the worship of Mars, and specifically Mars, the planet, and those characteristics that sort of embodied the deities were also associated with the planet itself. And so the beginning, one of the earliest deities that was associated with the planet Mars was Era. And Era was an Akkadian god of plague. Later on, Era turned into Nergal, which was a Babylonian god of the underworld. But Nergal turned into Ares, which then turned into Mars. So there's this long-standing sort of mythology surrounding the red planet. And perhaps it's because the planet is red that it has been associated with such sort of I don't know. I can't even say vile, but so there's lower energy activities, perhaps. But I don't necessarily have a whole lot because, as I said, I don't want to get into the sort of the Martian or the Mars mythology. But as I said, do you think that that's kind of a bad first step, at least symbolically? Should we rename Mars to something else? I think I lost everybody.
No, I mean, it's a funny question. That's a really interesting situation for sure.
I was just being a bit cheeky with this. I'm not necessarily trying to be very serious because, as I said, I didn't have a huge mythology section.
To me, it makes complete sense. I mean, we're humans. We like conflict.
Mhm.
We, there's, if everything was, peachy keen, we would create a problem to go solve, right?
Mhm.
Even going back to like the Garden of Eden, like it's human nature to create our own problems. So it makes sense that the first planet we want to land on is the planet of war and strife and conflict, as far as the symbolism goes. So it seems like right up our species alley.
It does actually, yeah, and it definitely does, and it kind of also reminds me, and there's like so many parallels to weird, as I say, like synchronistic moments, and that kind of like inspires me to do maybe a episode on synchronicity at some point. But it also reminds me of like going up the chakras. So if like humanity was starting its way up the chakras, it starts at the red planet, the sacral or the root chakra, this very like grounded, deep sort of symbolism to this planet. And so I'm wondering what the other planets might be if we follow that sort of trajectory. But again, I unfortunately didn't have too much about the mythology side of stuff. So if you guys have anything to add, please do, or I'm gonna have to move on.
Well, I'm like that. I'm really interested in how the gravitation or how the gravity would affect our mind, right? As if all is mental wavelengths, these sorts of things, and it's lower energy type stuff, and just to like its inherent, just a hard place to live because it's cold all the time.
Yeah.
How that would affect generational psychology, or the psychology of future generations living there. They might end up being some real tough people.
Yeah, that's a pretty fascinating idea too. How living on a different planet is going to affect our psychology,
and if because it's kind of the symbol of Mars, like people tend to embody that sort of symbolism, like Texans are Texans, right? They get real hardcore about their Texans,
right?
Or about the Texas nature. Will Martians be real hardcore about their Martian nature and just
maybe
shoot first and ask questions later, sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, and then if there is some sort of metaphysical sort of complex that surrounds the energy of Mars, do those people become warlike? Do they become, sort of the embodiment of what Mars represents? I mean, because if you look at Atlantean lore, at least more of the New Age Atlantean lore, their whole creation of Atlantis really came from this concept that Mars was inhabited by the Atlanteans, and they destroyed the planet, and then moved on to a different planet, and that these Martians that came to Earth were warlike sort of people that sort of embodied that ethos. So it would be interesting to see how planetary energy affects the psychology of humans, for sure.
And that warrior mentality. And I wonder too how that would block, say, technological progression, because obviously when you're in a war, you can't really build peaceful technologies.
Right.
It becomes way harder to do.
Yeah, maybe even less creativity as well.
Yeah.
Because there will be less of a need for it. So yeah, I mean, harsh environments mixed with harsh or scant resources mixed with hardy people. Yeah, perhaps Mars does create a sort of warlike race of humans.
That are super soft if they come back to Earth.
Yes, that are super spongy if they ever leave the planet.
Spongy and mean.
Yeah, totally.
Try to conquer Earth again.
Yeah. Oh, that would be hilarious. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it kind of makes sense, because if you think of Earth is like this garden, this paradise amongst our solar system. It's really extraordinary how beautiful and abundant Earth is compared to all of these other planets. Like, you think about the conditions on Mars, and that's like, that's within our livability. all the other planets in our solar system would be dead on arrival, and it's pretty incredible.
Although I think the view from Olympus Mons would be pretty cool.
Wow.
Or be able to take pictures from that giant canyon would be pretty awesome. Like,
hell
just
yeah,
stand in there,
especially at night. You can see the stars, man.
How humbling it might be, even comparing it to something like the Grand Canyon, because I'm sure that brings feelings of humility. Can only imagine what standing in that canyon would be like.
Just incredible sheer vastness. And another fun fact that I forgot to mention to you guys: sunsets are blue on Mars, so that's kind of cool.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah. And so, now that we're talking about sort of the psychology and Mars and weird stuff, I wanted to get into a couple of my conspiracy speculations with you guys. Of course, it wouldn't be an Exofathom episode if I didn't go a little bit kooky. And so you were going to bear with me here. But this is actually something that we've talked about before. And Ayla and I kind of started this whole series because of this sort of thing. So we got into the series Exofathom because of astral projection, and we did a series about the declassified CIA documents that talk about the possibility of a holographic universe and how to tap into that with your mind to create astral projection soldiers for the military. It's a very fascinating subject that we have documented for about 6 episodes, I believe. We still have to finish it, but we haven't done that yet. But if you feel so inclined, please check those episodes out, because it gives you a great deal of information about how the U.S. government experimented with astral projection back in the 1950s. Now,
we literally read the entire report, and after a paragraph or two, we'd stop and be like, "What the f are they talking about?" It's insane. Like, what? And then you look at the date, and you're like, "What?" And I think where Nick's going with this is going to be even more like, "What?"
Yeah. So I mean, that whole thing really kind of inspired this show, and we started off the show because of these CIA documents. Well, it just so happens that in this batch of CIA documents, there is more to share about the experiences of Mars, because the government just had to know what was going on Mars. And they apparently sent their astral projectors out to Mars in order to do some reconnaissance work. And I'm going to pull up an article here. This is by iHeartRadio, oddly enough, which is funny. But it says, oh, shoot, let me see if I can actually pull it up here so that I'm not like, hold on. Boop, boop. There we go. Declassified CIA documents show how they saw ancient civilizations on Mars. So this is actually in the same dump that we found our Project Gateway experience documents from. And so there are many more documents about astral projection experiments that the government did. There's even one about an astral projector going to Jupiter and recanting what it's like on Jupiter, which is totally an episode I'm getting into in the future. But in this episode, or this document, it sent the remote viewer. So the remote viewer was tasked with going to Mars 1 million years ago. And prior to this session, the remote viewer doesn't know what they're going to be asked to look at. So they get an envelope, and it tells them coordinates and time, and that's where they have to work with. And so by utilizing the methods in the Gateway experience documents, such as clicking out and synchronizing your brain vibrations to that of the resonant vibrations of the universe, you're able to astral project to anywhere in the universe. And so this is the account of the astral projector when he was finally arriving on Mars and reporting back to the government. And it says, I quote, "I kind of got an oblique view of a pyramid, or a pyramid form. It's very high. It's kind of sitting in a large depressed area. I'm tracking severe clouds, more like a dust storms. I'm looking at the entire after effect of a major geological problem. I just kept seeing very large people. They appear thin and tall, but they are very large, wearing some kind of clothes. It goes on to say, deep inside of a cavern, not a cavern, more like a canyon, I am looking up, and the sides of the steep wall that seem to go on forever. And there's like a structure. It's like the wall of a canyon that has been carved. Again, I'm getting a very large structure, huge sections of smooth stone. It's like a rabbit warren, corners of a room. They're really huge. Perception is that the ceiling is very high, walls very wide. I have appears to be a very end of a very large road, and there's a marker thing that's very large. Keep getting Washington Monument overlay. It's an obelisk. I see pyramids. They're huge. It's filtered from storms or something. They're like shelters for storms, different chambers, but they're almost stripped of any kind of furnishings or anything. It's like strictly a functional place for sleeping, or that's not a good word, hibernation, some form I can't get. I get real raw inputs, storms, savage storms, and they're sleeping through storms. The ancient people, they're dying. It's past their time or age. They're very philosophic about it. They're just looking for a way to survive, and they can't. There just evidently was a group of party of them that went out to find a new place to live. And it's like I'm getting all kinds of overwhelming input about the communications of or the corruption of their environment. It's falling very rapidly, and this group went somewhere, like a long way to find another place to live. And that is the communique that the government documented from an astral projector tasked to go check out what Mars was like 1 million years ago. And I wanted to bring this up because not only is it just strange and fascinating that I believe this batch of documents was in the 1952 batch of documents. Now, I don't know how much we knew about the weather systems on Mars back then, nor do I know if we knew anything about the large ravine that we were just talking about, because it seems that the astral projector was in that ravine and perhaps found an alcove, almost kind of like the city of Petra. Do you guys know what that looks like?
Could be
a little bit.
Yeah, so you should like, show it for our viewers.
Right. So like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? Alo, have I ever showed you that movie or no?
I think we've seen the Indiana Jones movies.
Here, let me bring up a picture of Petra, Jordan, because this is kind of where I kind of got the sense that it was something along the lines of this inside this big canyon. So let me share this with you guys real quick. Oops, sorry, not a video. But yeah, let's see. Sorry, guys. I just got to bring up the application. Here we go. This is Petra here. And it's in Jordan. And what's really impressive about this is that these giant temple structures are carved right into the side of this gorge. And so the astral projection sort of made me think of something similar to this. Say the person is at the bottom of that very large ravine and they look to the side where the gorge, walls are, and they might see something carved out of the side of the cliff. And the astral projector goes on to say that this is a place where the entities that lived on Mars 1 million years ago hibernated through storms. Now, again, I don't know how much we knew about the storms and the regularity in storms on Mars, but I'm venturing to say that perhaps we didn't know everything that was going on there for sure. But I thought it was very interesting and cool. And I want to get your guys' input for sure, because there's something weird about this, because it's in similar relation to the astral projection on Jupiter. They mention key details that were not common knowledge about those planets back then. So in the astral projection one, they mention seeing diamonds rain from the sky. And that was actually not found out by the scientific community until about 40 years later. So that's why I kind of question whether they knew anything about the storm systems and the large ravine on Mars and things like that, because it would seem to me that perhaps they didn't. And this is another one of these strange anomalies.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny because I could, you know, hear that and be like, well, maybe it was just a good guess, like if you're thinking about like what a planet could be like, like, yeah, I'm sure there were maybe a bunch of other remote viewers that didn't guess right. And if they're all guessing, like one could just hit the mark. But where I started to pause was another case where they talk about diamonds falling from the sky. Wasn't there one
Yeah.
where there was a remote viewer and they were
Yes.
talking about
Jupiter.
Jupiter? Yeah.
Mhm.
And then like that's what happens at Jupiter. So then
Mhm.
you're like, that's an odd thing to guess, like
It is a very
diamonds.
odd thing to guess. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like I don't know. There's another Star Trek episode. Go
Oh
back
boy.
to that. But there's this alien who comes aboard and is tinkering with their transportation system. And then they end up going like, you know, millions of miles away from their home universe. And while it's happening, like memories, like people's memories are manifesting on the ship. And the alien, while he's like kind of zoning in, he's muttering to himself. And he's talking about how time is consciousness. And the kid hears him. And then they have this whole discussion about how, like, in some universes, or like humans will evolve to realize that consciousness, space, and time are one and the same. And it was just like a really provocative episode. It's in the first season. Highly recommend. I'll try to, put a comment for that particular episode. But it's like cool to kind of just think about that stuff.
Yeah.
Was that too out there?
No.
Okay.
I mean, for me, it makes sense. I mean, it'd be a little arrogant of humanity to think of itself as the only ones that can ruin a planet and go find a new home, right?
Yeah.
Even if you step back your time frame from a million years ago, billions of years ago, whatever your time step is, you can kind of shift it around, and you still kind of get to the same thing.
Mm.
There's also a good episode of The Twilight Zone that kind of deals with this, where these astronauts are getting communications from their home planet, which seems like Earth, about going to this new planet. But they found out that on their old planet, there was a nuclear war that killed all the nations on that planet. And they found out the planet they're arriving to is Earth, and they're, set to repopulate it. As far as like clairvoyance and telepathy and that sort of stuff goes, I mean, it wouldn't be too out there to think that if there's some sort of intelligent life, that they would develop communication differently. And if they are as advanced, that they've been around for millions and millions and millions of years, they may have evolved to communicate both telepathically and through spoken word. And maybe, with humans, they chose to speak, which, would make sure that their mouth wouldn't go away, and they still probably need to eat. They still need to create energy, right? And then just from a civilization point of view, there's been tons of civilizations before that have built towns into sides of cliffs and stuff like that. Even going back to the Anunnaki, where I'll do an episode on it, but it's like where both the Mayans, Incans, and the Aztecs, I believe, like where they have a common ancestor. At least a few of them do, and I believe it was the Anunnaki. It might be the mound builders, so I might be getting that all mixed up. But anyways, there's a set of Native Americans that would build all their towns into sides of cliffs to avoid heat. So it makes sense that on a planet where you have these severe storms, if they existed or they didn't mess it up, that they would build their towns within there and they would hibernate. We have animals here that hibernate. Makes sense that other creatures would hibernate in over there.
Yeah.
Whether or not they made it to Earth, man, that must have been rough. Imagine getting to the other planet and then finding out your home planet was
It's just
wrecked.
toast. Yeah. Seriously. Well, and it would make sense that if you're going to hibernate on a planet that has 3-month dust storms with winds of like 300 miles an hour, that you would choose your spot at the bottom of a very tall ravine, where perhaps the wind would be much less severe, and within the mountain itself, you would probably have perfect protection to keep yourself away from the dust storms. So I think it's a pretty cool and elegant design to something that we probably will have to continue with in the future, and perhaps we can take this sort of astral projection and sort of utilize it to accommodate ourselves on Mars as well. But I do definitely think that, like, and it's funny because if we're looking at this astral projection and it's scheduled to be about 1 million years ago, those Martians that decided to leave to go find a better home, maybe they landed on Earth. Maybe, the humans were just starting to come around 1 million years ago, right?
They're among us.
They're among us.
Well,
yeah.
I told you, as a Plutonian, hanging out with all these humans, it's kind of a drag at times. But
Yeah, I'm sure.
I can see why the Martians would want to hide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and like perhaps we're seeing one of these Prometheus stories where these Martians, in order to avoid the catastrophe that happened on Mars, come to Earth about 1 million years ago, interfere with the genetic makeup of the chimpanzees at the time, and humans are born from that. At least that's just a wild speculation that we like to have on Exofathom. Don't sue us. We're not making any definitive statements here.
Sue us.
Did
we just say
More money, yeah.
Right thing? Like what? I mean, it logically follows, especially if they're philosophical about things, why they may not have never told humans that they're messing with genetic code, or want to take a step back, because I mean, that could be a heavy thing just to know that you
surprise, we're your god.
Yeah, like oh yeah. You mean it wasn't all random chance?
Right.
That was our planet.
Yeah.
What gives you the right? And it's like, do you still want to be chimpanzees? I don't know, man.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But, you never gave us a choice.
But I mean, it wouldn't bother me at all. And I don't find that far-fetched. I'm just interested if at any higher levels of, say, government or culture, because you want to regulate that sort of stuff, if there's communication and what that communication looks like, because that'd be pretty cool to see. I mean, humans and Martians just kind of getting along and be like, all right, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, definitely. That would be very cool to see. Well, and just to piggyback on this concept that perhaps Mars was once a populated place that got destroyed and then had to bring its life to Earth, and we're completing this weird cosmic loop where we destroyed Mars and now we went to Earth, and now we're going to destroy Earth to go to Mars. Maybe we just bounce back and forth between the planets for eternity. But there's a little bit of backing to this topic. There is amongst the scientific community, at least I don't know if they can call themselves scientists, but there are some people within the scientific community, especially this Dr. John Brandenburg, that believe the Martian civilization might have been wiped out in the past by nuclear weapons. Weren't we just talking about somebody wanting to send nukes to Mars? Well, apparently Mars has a very heavy density of a certain isotope that can only be found from a nuclear blast, and that isotope, I believe, is Xenon something. I just missed. It is here we go, Xenon isotope mass. So the isotopes, or the collection of Xenon isotopes on Mars, is at such a high level that they are having a hard time finding a natural explanation for why the radiation is such a high level. Many speculate that and perhaps a little bit, fallaciously, that perhaps Mars has already been nuked, and that is the reason for such a thin atmosphere and for such high levels of xenon. But yeah, I mean, this just wanted to bring that up because I think it ties in perfectly to this sort of Ouroboros of conversation that we had. Do you guys have anything that you might want to say about that? Do you think that we could be coming from a civilization that had already nuked itself to oblivion? This certainly would parallel with the sort of Atlantean mythos, and a lot of other mythology about great civilizations that fell.
Yeah, I mean, this is all very fun stuff to think about because, like, yeah, I mean, like, we haven't been, like, in the grand scheme of things, we haven't been around that long, and yeah, I think there's just, you're always going to find something cool, and it could contradict something else and be a scientific mystery until it's not. And then when it's not, that gives us information on other mysteries, so, like, yeah, who knows?
Who knows, indeed. Yeah.
I mean, what's Venus like? Can we build a subway to Venus or something? Is there?
Well, Venus, I heard, is pretty rough too. So
I mean, it's going to be rough anywhere. That's not Earth, right?
Totally.
I mean, I like how nukes are both the problem and the
solution. Yes, totally. It's, as I said, the Ouroboros. We're just like having this weird circular loop of existence.
I mean, just I think the thing that would bum me out most is that within the inner planets, the idea that there would be no different, I guess, materials that we could use to try to get our technology further along to get, past the asteroid belt, to get to the, the outer rim of planets, and then beyond that. That's the, because, like, I don't really care if we land on Mars or when we land on Mars. The thinking has to be further out.
Right.
And then what's the technology we build to get through those asteroid fields, to get past all of that? Because if we're trapped within our solar system, then it's a zero-sum game, right? We're still just gonna run into the sun, or the sun's gonna burn out, or whatever. So, where do we go, like you mentioned earlier? Where do we go after Mars, and how do we obtain the resources in an ideally ethical way where we can have a galactic federation?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that that's probably the only way we're going to be able to do it. And hopefully, like Ayla said, there is a galactic federation. Maybe they can help us out, because we certainly shouldn't be the first ones to create this federation. I'd be a lot more comfortable if it was already established by some other beings out there in the universe. And, if we're able to adopt that, then I'm A-okay with that.
What do you think the price is to get into that galactic federation? What do you have to? Because I'm sure, like, national currencies mean nothing to them. There has to be some sort of hard resource, right?
Well, I think it's also the technological advancement, right? So I don't know if in Star Trek it's this way, but it's like the idea of being able to warp or to achieve light speed, right? That's when you basically get introduced to the Federation, because it's now you can travel interstellarly, and so you have to be inundated into the fold. Yeah, go ahead, Ayla. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just thinking about, like, the arms race. How like, one country gets nuclear weapons, so now they all need to level up in order to participate. I think if there were some sort of galactic federation or whatever, like, I think that the way that we would behave would change with the emergence of Martian intelligence, external intelligence, right? Because, like
an external authority sort of thing.
Or not even just authority, but it's like, we have so many reasons to be separate from one another and then enter this alien race from another planet, suddenly we are the human race. And so I think that, you find one, you have to assume there's more. And then you start questioning, coming together and being like, well, what do we think about this? And it is a vulnerable position. I think I was getting a little bit triggered when I hear people talk about like the colonization of America and what happened and all that stuff. And it's like a big factor in that situation was germs, just germs. And so, yeah, we could go to other planets and there could be this threat that we're going to be like a locust on the universe colonizing alien planets, but don't discount germs and don't discount those other alien, races if they exist, because I feel like we could be facing like a humbling experience, which could be good for us too.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about the way you interact with friends versus the way you interact with strangers, right? Civility is usually the difference, right? You can say crazy things amongst friends, but amongst strangers or professionals, you may change the way you speak or behave. And the same thing I would imagine if we ran right into a technologically more advanced civilization. We still may be barbaric within Earth colonies, but would shift behavior to be more civil around something that could wipe us off the face of the universe with the press of a button.
Yeah.
It's like,
I agree. I see that. Yeah, for sure.
The nuclear button thing, right? Like it forces diplomacy rather than just going straight towards war. And I think the same thing too runs with intergalactic civilizations. The whole manifest destiny thing, though, is just the idea of it, right? Like germs was a big cause, but that happened hundreds of years before, right? Like by the time manifest destiny is happening, the native population is 90 to 95% wiped out already due to those germs.
Yeah.
So if we have, exoplanet germs that we go to land on, find out they kill us, that's of course going to wipe our human population, have less to work with. But the idea of like we have the right to expand is an American one, but I think is closer to a human idea.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, go ahead, Ayla. Sorry.
Well, I mean, like, it's kind of funny because, there were certain people on certain continents that were like, we're going to coexist and we're going to just stay here and be happy. And then there were others that were like, let's destroy all of our resources. So now we have to go find new resources, So, like, I think there's two definite approaches.
It wasn't all kumbaya. I mean, let's be real.
There were a lot of different people going on. So, but no, I just think that like there's a lot of complexity to humans, and I think that it is a good question to bring up what ethos or philosophy or explorer's mindset we bring to space travel, because right now it's at the hands of NASA and our government. And like, if we're the first ones to make contact or the first ones to build a settlement, like, I don't know. I mean, like, should we, like, just because we can, doesn't that, like, shouldn't we want to bring in other, I don't know. I mean, it's very complex. And
it depends on the country. So,
yeah.
So if you look at like European evolution, their civilizations, they had, the domesticated animals, they had the technology, they had the resources, and so that inner fighting caused them to rapidly make technological strides in other places that were like here in the Americas. I think we only had like the llama that could help us out, and like llamas kind of are hard to do any sort of work with. So like our strides in war tech did not go as far. So that's why there might have been some infighting in other places, but it did not cause like this this warrior type culture with advanced technologies to expand. And then if you extrapolate that out towards, this is like the God's germs and steel germs and
Guns,
God.
germs, and steel.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
That's this argument. But if you extrapolate that out further with other planets, if their governments are more advanced, but their technology is not so much advanced, that's where we might see like the barbaric side of humanity, which would suck.
Mhm.
And then if we bring other nations into the fold, we can, but we have to be careful. Like you can't have like a global thing, because then the global thing is like, well, who gets to
Who runs
decide
the
the
global thing?
morals? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, bring all the countries, let those ideas argue out. But even that is an American idea, right? Other countries may be like, nope, we're fighting because of
Yeah, we don't want you guys involved.
Well,
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
just think about it, like, let's say, the country, I don't know, like, we're used to elections and things like that. Like, it's just weird to think that, like, a small group of people could change the trajectory of some sort of intergalactic diplomacy without the input of the majority of the humanoids. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the only thing I'm trying to allude to here.
Yeah, but if they're all stuck on Earth, then nobody's accountable for what you do in space. So I mean,
No one
I think I agree a little bit with both of what you're saying. I just think that there is probably a threat. I think that we need to be, as humans, probably intimidated into compliance for a little while. At least as like if there were an overarching federation of galactic beings, my hope would be that their tech is so far advanced that they could anticipate an attack from us from like a million light years away, and like the idea of any sort of conquering would just become sort of moot and perhaps detrimental to the survival of the species.
I would hope it would be in that sweet spot of advance where they could still, because like with germs, right? You can have really ancient diseases and viruses that can attack the body that our body has no defense mechanisms for, because our immune system has moved on. We just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Now imagine there's some galactic federation and we have this weird ancient style of fighting that they are just incapable of adapting to, because they're so far advanced that they don't know how to contend with us. We end up overthrowing some galactic
or like the
federation.
super virus in the ice of Antarctica that's slowly melting away right now.
Yes.
100.
Awesome. Well, that's kind of all the stuff that I have for this episode. Did you guys want to say anything else before we wrap up? I kind of rambled on there for a bit. So
No,
you good?
pretty good. Mars is
Yeah.
gonna be interesting.
It will be interesting for sure. I mean, I think luckily, in our lifetime, we'll be able to see a human on Mars. So that'll be an exciting event for sure. The first steps.
Stack that Dogecoin, the Mars bars.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Buy some Mars bars. Well, yeah, thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate you taking the time out this Friday evening to listen to us ramble about stuff that we have very little understanding of, but that is the nature of Exofathom. We go big, or we also just stay home. So we go big and stay home. But we really appreciate you listening, and we hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please leave us a like and a subscription if you feel so inclined. Otherwise, thank you, and thank you to Ayla, and thank you to Mike, and we will see you probably back next week. Until next time, Cognonauts, stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.